Welcome to my second attempt at podcasting, though it is technically a third attempt thanks to a critical error in not hitting the record button about an hour and a half ago. Today I'm joined by a very special guest. Special in many ways, as we will see. This is someone I've never met in person, but I've gotten to know quite well over the past year or so. Also, someone who wishes to remain anonymous, but was kind enough to share her thoughts with us on a variety of topics. She's a Jamaican born student living and studying chemistry in the United Kingdom, uh, joining us by way of Discord. And I was hoping we could start, for real this time, briefly by going over how we met digitally. Um, so, welcome.
Mhm. Thank you. When we met, it was on an MBTI forum online,
And quickly,
and
MBTI is just
it's
it's a
a
personality typology. Yeah, it's a
yes.
Myers-Briggs type indicator test that can
hmm
be, you can sort of fall into, what is it, one of 16 categories?
Yes, it's well, some call it a pseudoscience, but it's
Oh, sure.
definitely
I've
based.
heard it called many things. One of my favorites is it's astrology for college students.
hmm
Yeah.
And well, I guess I'm in college, but um, there is, you can definitely see like correlations in person. And I, out of curiosity, was just looking into it. I had a lot of spare time. I was on a gap year. Um, and I came across you online. And initially, we did not get along very
No, no.
well.
I remember that part um just because it was probably entertaining for me at the time to be sort of anonymously abrasive. Like I can
Mm,
definitely get that way. If I'm anonymous, then I really do let the filter off, and I I can definitely um, accept at least part of the blame for us not really seeing eye to eye at the very beginning.
mhm. I actually remember it was, I must have said something that uh, was quite harsh, and you initially misunderstood me. And that might have been the first time I DM'd you to apologize. And we cleared it up. And after that, I realized, okay, well, you're just a human. And I think you uh, might have thought the same for me. And
Who knows what I was thinking, right? It's all
yeah.
digital.
hmm And yeah, we just kept talking somehow.
Yeah, it was a
Mm,
chance encounter because I know I don't frequent those forums that often, and you said that
mhm,
we met the first time that you had ever joined, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
very
Um,
serendipitous. Um,
yeah.
and we even stopped talking for a while, uh, and then picked right back up. Um,
hmm
and that's sort of,
Just by chance.
yeah, again by chance, right?
Mm,
So very strange, but um, if you do ascribe to the MBTI theory, it's not that strange because you happen to fall into a
mhm,
category commonly
Yeah.
said to mesh well with my own test results.
hmm
So you're in a category of extroverted, intuitive feeling and
hmm
perceiving,
Yeah.
and I've tested and you've confirmed, and you're sort of the expert here. I just sort of took the test and ran with it.
hmm
You
Yeah. You're introverted, intuitive, thinking, and judging.
right.
So, um, I guess with intuitive thought, uh, that's where we kind of can connect,
Hmm.
but you definitely fill in the gaps that I have. whilst I guess with my personality, I just, yeah, we get on well, and that seems to be a common thread between people of our types.
Yeah, and I would say it's if if um if I'm forced to think of an analogy, it seems like you lead the way with your feelings, and I sort of trail with my thoughts and judgments about what you
Hmm.
say and do.
Yes.
And it's almost like things that we were meant to do conversationally. Um,
Hmm.
but that being said, we have sort of covered a lot of ground unrecorded, which I have to say the first time I did this, that was also true, except it wasn't due to error. It was just, you know, an old friend, and when we were just catching up. Um,
Hmm.
which I guess we sort of did that prior to me failing to record as well, but um, that's neither here nor there. What I was hoping to sort of um, focus, not exclusively, but sort of generally theme this uh, podcast as would be kind of like a juxtaposition between Gen Z, which you are um,
Hmm.
a member, and sort of an older millennial, which I am, and our perspectives on sort of how crazy things are, how we grew up,
Yeah.
and everything in between, and nothing's off the table. So
Hmm.
um, let's see where that takes us. I think uh, one of the one of the best ways that we didn't record to get this kicked off was mentioning that I am not a Twitter user, but you sort of grew up with it.
Hmm. Yeah. Um, I'd say being on Twitter, I think it definitely gets a bad rep, and that's not unearned. Um, it's well, most of social media definitely moved into toxicity, and I think Twitter especially is a space where people, it's made so that you keep sharing your opinions and other people give their opinions on your opinions and so on. You keep sharing, and that's what it's for. But as we all know, many opinions are probably best kept to yourself or
Yeah.
revised. Um,
Would you say that
and
that's by design, or that inevitably happens with social media?
mm, yeah, I think it's by design. Um, People love to be heard and accepted. Having a space where I guess with you feel like there's less judgment because you're not seeing someone in person, you're not seeing their physical reaction. You can imagine all the people responding to you as avatars. You don't need to, I guess, feel personally attacked, but the reality is humans have emotions. So as much as people try, after a while, there's a growing dependency on acceptance, on validation from those you interact with. And I think that the way that social media as a whole is, they capitalize on that human need, um, which is very difficult because Twitter's definitely a space where uh, younger millennials and Zoomers have grown up. So
Mm,
when you're in your teenage years and most of what you feel is confusion and um, doubt in yourself, a lot of negative emotions arise as you like deal with the changes internally and externally. Um, so having a space where all of your thoughts are being recorded and projected into the world isn't necessarily like healthy for you, even if it brings momentarily, like just a moment of instant happiness. Um,
Yeah, the
yeah.
bite-sized gratification is sort of the
Mhm.
world we live in. I think one of the things you mentioned that really struck me as just, well, surprising, as well as sort of like um, almost like shocking, uh, is that you were recalling that you and all of your peers sort of like look forward
Mhm.
to the moment that you turned, I guess it was 13, so that you could get a
Mhm.
social media account. And that's
Yeah.
like, yeah, that blew me away, because
Mhm.
I was in college when I first jumped on Facebook, and um that's that's changed so much now that it's considered almost like a place for elderly people. um
Mhm.
and that's been in the span of, I guess, 10 years. I sort of missed the MySpace years, but with my experience using Facebook, I think I used it for maybe 5 years, and then it became
Mhm.
old hat. Uh, and just the rapid change with how our generations have been exposed to social media
Mhm.
are almost incomparable. Uh, your first interaction being with a fully polished, well, I wouldn't call it fully polished, but a relatively, well formed
Yeah.
media platform at the age of 13, whereas, I'm basically a young adult um, when it was
Mhm.
first starting out. Very, very,
Yeah.
very different. Almost unfair to compare the two.
Yes. I found that, I mean, we, seeing as the age that you were allowed to go on there was 13, um, and by the time my peers and I, we'd all heard about the dangers of the internet, but I suppose going on there, we almost made it like a coming of age thing,
Hmm.
as well as a rebellious thing for people, for kids whose parents didn't consent to it. Um,
Oh,
we all
yeah.
knew that we weren't really meant to be on there, and in part we understood the threats, but uh, well, we were children, so we didn't really understand the full consequences, and that just egged us on. So, you know, we
Hmm.
we didn't grow up like as younger children on the internet. Uh, Not at all, unless possibly gaming, um, with some with solitaire or something. But we, it was exciting, and I think for some kids having maybe older siblings who they saw on there, it was definitely like, let's all get on this. But
Uh, yeah.
mhm, um, it's not a space that's uh, good for teenagers to be on. I'd say it's not a space that, if you're in your formative years, you should occupy too much. But that's what ended up happening for the
Yeah,
most
I
part.
think I think one thing that we did touch on earlier was pretty much that, uh, relative to the way I was brought up, sort of latchkey, outdoor play,
Hmm.
um, as long as the sun was shining, um, you know, going outside, getting dirty. Uh, that's sort of gone away, uh, where your playground is digital. It's in
Hmm.
your app store. It's on your phone or your tablet, or what, however you can access the online world, which
Hmm.
is, for better or for worse, that is just the world that you and to a very good extent, I would say younger millennials have been sort of forced into. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and as you said, probably not ideal. Um, but
Yeah.
then again, what childhood really is ideal?
Mm-hmm.
I'd say for older millennials, the '90s were pretty solid. There's a reason there's that nostalgic, um, retrospect.
Mm-hmm.
Not just in media, but people's lived memories are pretty much in agreement that that, that wasn't such a bad time.
Yeah. Uh, it's strange because I can logically understand things that people experienced in the 90s. There's some films I would have watched where which were set in the 90s and made in the 90s, but um I guess the core of it isn't something that I can relate to. Um, if I think to like my earlier childhood, I remember being shocked seeing in shows that like kids would get excited if they maybe got a TV in their room. Like that would be
Hmm.
maybe a sign of wealth, like having the
Hmm.
televisions with the large backs and I but that's distant memory for me. Those aren't memories that I'd maybe define myself by, whilst and I think that's the main difference with Zoomers. We might have some memories of kind of pre-social media, but
Hmm.
social media was something that we were on at a time where like we're trying to find ourselves and still are.
Yeah, I would say even more interesting than that is you all sort of hit it at the same time. Whereas
Mm-hmm.
I very clearly remember uh, sort of various stages, like as technology was developing, not everyone sort of caught up at the same speed. Within
Mm-hmm.
reason, like people would kind of know what you're talking about, but um, one person might have a Sega Genesis, one person might, have a PC game that they can play online. Someone might have like
Mm-hmm.
a Nintendo or, you know, there was this up and coming variety. So a lot of my generation, I think, experienced the same movement but differently, whereas yours
Mm-hmm.
seems to be uh, pretty uniform in its
Yeah.
its introduction and experience.
Mm-hmm. It it was definitely a thing where once you were a certain age, there was this expectation. Um, I vividly remember when I was maybe 14 or 13, um, I was being asked about a show that was popular and I didn't know what it was. And I was essentially excluded from interacting with like my peers just based on that. So I got into the show and that wasn't enough. You had to know the memes, you had to know
Mm.
what was going on online. So then I needed a Tumblr account. And once I got that, like you could make friends, you could interact with people. And so there was this, peer pressure for every teenager to be reaching these social media milestones at the same time. So, and it wouldn't just be, people in your class or within the country, you'd be interacting with teenagers, in other countries as well. And I think
Yeah.
that's definitely intense. Um, Without understanding what made us different, or we were trying to find common ground through pop culture, which in a way is beautiful, but um, I think that those lost nuances really um, caused a lot of confusion and
Oh,
even
sure.
stress kids out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think the topics that we sort of touched on briefly were how small talk is just no longer a skill set that's
Mhm.
natural or at least well developed by certain ages, and that the what you were just describing sort of throws stranger danger on its head, um,
Mhm.
and the unintended consequence being you'll share maybe uh, rather personal details about yourself uh, publicly or to people you've never met,
Mhm.
and at the same time have some serious anxiety about getting on the phone and making an appointment or
Mhm.
having any real interaction, quote unquote
Yeah.
real.
Definitely. It really screws up how you interact with people and how you see people. Um, Understanding that people are whole individuals rather than the things they say online or the pictures they share on Instagram. And like I've even seen videos on TikTok recently where you'll have Zoomers, they'll take a picture of like you'll have a young Zoomer boy taking a video of a girl nearby and saying how she's attractive and he wants the internet to do its thing and connect them rather than
Oh
just
wow.
walking up to her and asking her out or something like that. I've seen several videos like that, um, because interacting in person has just become a, so much more intimidating than it should be, just because everything happens online.
So I mean, I think I heard you right. it's
Mhm.
it's been normalized to use social media to almost crowdsource your relationships.
Yeah, yeah,
Wow.
that's definitely been
That
where
is
people
intense.
they egg people on. There's this ongoing joke on Twitter where if someone expresses like attraction to someone else, people will go under their comments and pretend that this is someone they've known for a long time who like endorsing them, saying this man has helped save my family.
Oh,
just just to help them out. And
good grief.
that's, yeah. So it's funny, but in terms of an actual relationship with someone else, it's not
Oh yeah.
good.
Yeah, I've had disastrous relationship based I've had them fail based on much more than that. So, uh ooh, I can see how tragic that sort of unintended reality, you know, with
Hmm.
social media could be. Um, oof, I need to absorb that for a second. That's
Yeah.
uh,
Uh,
that
and
is
it
just a weird
definitely
thing.
it is, but it's not shocking to me because it makes sense. Like that. I
Well,
mean,
sure,
it's
I
not
can wrap my
normal.
head. See, it's like I can definitely wrap my head around the idea of not wanting. Okay, so picture
Mhm.
myself, 13-year-old kid, crush on
Mhm.
a girl. You don't have the guts or even the skills to go up and say hello, but you
Mhm.
have this tool that will do all the work for you. I mean, where's the guesswork in that? Um,
Yeah.
it's almost a foregone conclusion that you're gonna take uh, that path without
Mhm.
even a second thought. Which I mean, not
Yeah.
that kids are known for their second thoughts, but um,
Mm,
it's almost like they don't have a chance uh, in
yeah.
an environment like that. So I
It's
I can sympathize with that. It's not it's not beyond me. It is just
yeah.
weird that it got to that point. So hearing that for the first time now, wow.
And I think that's what I mean. I went to an all-girls school, so I already you could say that my interactions with people were impaired by that as well.
A bit of
But
stunted, yeah, growth there.
hmm but you add the internet, and I'm pretty much going blind into the world,
Mm.
um, heading into university or even in different internet spaces. Because I mean, I think basics in how guys work or dating or even friendships, I just have no experience with. So it's been odd trying to like balance things because there's no real way to now. There are no rules. The internet doesn't come with a manual. Um, Things that would be inappropriate in person are normal online. You know, you can ask personal questions and it's not seen as creepy
Hmm.
or aggressive. It's just another day on Twitter.
Yeah, in a world where information is the only currency, they're just asking for more information,
Hmm.
not really crossing any boundaries. Where I mean, are there any boundaries? You would
Yeah.
ask. Um, but I think you mentioned at one point that it has afforded you the ability to talk to older people who could sort of,
Hmm.
remember a time without the internet, or at least
Yeah.
one where the internet wasn't, you know, the means for social interaction.
Hmm. So, like, even meeting you, but other individuals, like, I've spoken to someone, a lady from the Middle East around your age, and she was in ENFP, so we also met through MBTI. And she had so much good advice for me that wasn't based around the internet. It didn't have anything to do with internet interactions. It was just, here's how I've dealt with life, here are my experiences, and why I've concluded things I've concluded, and how it might help you. You know, without the internet, we'd have never interacted.
Right.
Um, Same with other individuals, you know, so many people that would never enter my sphere. Um, I have been able to get to know and learn from, and vice versa, which is such a blessing. Um, and that's afforded through the internet. But
It's almost
I
like you're
think,
saying there's hope.
yeah, definitely. Um, but you know, it takes effort, I believe, on both sides to kind of
Meet somewhere in the middle.
acknowledge, yeah, definitely. And I think I think for most younger generations, trying to sympathize with older generations is hard because
Oh yeah.
you see and you feel all their mistakes and
Oh,
you
is that what it is?
yeah. You know, it's odd seeing like millennial chaos online. I think a lot of the, especially with the election, a lot
Oh
of the
yeah, we should
arguments.
mention this is November
Mm,
2nd, 2020.
yeah. So, you know, Zoomers, I think collectively we kind of have a more chill disposition. We, yeah, Zoomers can be passionate, but I'd say a lot of the passion, a lot of the anger is found within millennials
I
and
can
boomers, of
I
course.
can agree 100%. And well, and
Mhm.
I would say that a lot of that animus is generated between and feeds off of one another between millennials and boomers. It seems like Gen
Mhm.
Z is unexcitable because they're not the subject of uh, conflict.
Yeah.
in the same way that Gen X seems to have skirted the issue. they, I mean,
Mhm.
who knows where they are, what they're doing? They've they've
Uh,
kept their head down the whole time.
I mean, they've contributed with essential oils and COVID conspiracies.
You're right. You're right. How could we forget their fringe movements? Um,
Mhm.
but yeah,
But
there's
mhm.
some good Gen X actors and entertainers. So I'll give them that. But
Mhm.
as far as contemporary domestic and international politics, it seems like millennials have just how could I how could I do it any justice just by saying something? Uh, and I would say that it is younger millennials sort of rising uh,
Mhm.
as one. uh, I I have to mention, the older millennials like myself. We were old enough to be drafted when 9/11 happened, and a lot of us volunteered. And by the time we graduated, you know, university, uh, that's when the housing crisis hit. So we're a bit gun shy when it
Mhm.
comes to throwing our weight around. I mean, we've got ideas, obviously, but um, I think at least from I'll try and speak to my near peers and say that we're we're not always so quick to judge situations because of how badly and how frequently we've been getting burned.
Mhm.
Um, you know, uh, pick a year, it's happened. Um,
Yeah.
and
I
yeah, so definitely younger millennials are a bit chaotic. I'll grant you that. Um, but what I really like is knowing that you can sense that and observe it. Like I
Mhm.
think that shows a lot of potential that you're not blind or um, swept up in that commotion.
Mhm. Yeah. I think Zoomers are quite, I mean, a mix of overwhelmed and desensitized. Like
Hmm.
we've been watching younger millennials. They've, for some of us, have been like our role models. And all the siblings, all the
Oh,
cousins, or
sure, yeah.
just even seeing celebrities that have grown up with us and um, we watch the chaos and I think I guess being expected to care constantly, especially at a time when your emotions are most volatile, it's a lot. And Zoomers kind of have this whole thing where our humor is very self-deprecating and
Oh, yeah.
suicidal.
Yeah.
um,
I th-
because we're just, I guess, quite over it.
was it you I
Um,
was talking to about that, where like there
mm,
seems to be this collective humor about um I mean, you'll see it in memes all the time about how sad and depressed and
yeah.
like ready to die, or maybe it's not even that,
Hmm.
but it's the collective sadness and like
Yeah.
mental uh I guess anxiety associated with
Hmm.
where you are in life. Like I can sympathize with that 100%. I think
Yeah.
millennials more are ready to die than you all are, but
Yeah.
that's
Hmm.
that's not a virtue and that's not I'm not trying to say anything specific about that. I've just
Hmm.
seen it and, actual
Hmm.
suicides statistics play that out pretty well. I think at least in the United States,
Hmm.
our life expectancy is being driven down by the fact that you know um, I don't know if
Yeah.
they would call it an avoidable mortality, but um, yeah, at least in the
Hmm.
yeah, yeah. There's all sorts of reasons for that, but
Yeah.
Millennials seem to be winning in something.
Yeah, I think I think on the Zoomer side, some of it is well, it's very similar to younger millennials in terms of maybe a mental health crisis. Like I thinking back now, there were definitely I don't want to say fads because it feels like I'm minimizing it, but almost bouts of self-harm or um just kids that were exposing that they had depression or anxiety or PTSD, and it's it weirdly spread through a whole generation, like all of us being like, yep, we're mentally ill. Um, whether that's true or not, uh, I guess you'd have to go case by case, but
My
I guess,
impression of it, and
um,
obviously I'm not in it, is it's a
mhm,
tool for like commiseration. Like it's
yeah,
you guys are connecting, you know,
mhm,
in the way that you know how, and uh, a common emotion, especially with young people, is sort of like a despair about, whatever the
mhm,
case may be, whether you don't know about the future or your present situation or
yeah.
um,
Um,
I mean, I don't
I
think it's a
think,
well enough known fact that people's brains don't fully develop until about age 25.
mhm,
Coupled with, a lot of sports that still involve head trauma, to
yeah,
exacerbate that issue. And then drug use on
mhm,
top of that, there's definitely a lot going on.
yeah. I think millennials deal with, I guess, uh, having their expectations let down. Like you've
100%.
had
We were
a
born in the
brilliant childhood.
Yeah, a lot of us were born in the 80s and the 90s looked awesome. So we're like, all right,
Mm.
being an adult is going to be amazing. And then nine
Mm.
11, 2008 housing crisis, like just massive inflation, and
Mm.
I mean,
Well,
COVID kind of doesn't even really phase me. Like, I think people are freaking out a little bit more than they
mm.
should, but uh, yeah, we don't have to get into all of
Mm.
that. But what I was saying is, relatively speaking, COVID's just kind of a drop in the ocean at this point.
Yeah, and whilst I feel for Zoomers like myself, we were born into that uncertainty. We like were growing up with the repercussions of the things that shocked you guys.
Hmm.
And so it was like the feeling of, I guess, stability socially that is unfamiliar to me. So I guess the collective anxiety or depression that Zoomers kind of um, just have is based on that. Like it's not, it doesn't disturb us or anger us in the way it does with millennials because you guys are dealing with a deeper disappointment, but Zoomers still feel what's going on,
Right.
but
Yeah.
with less context.
You don't know why you're feeling this way.
Yeah, something feels bad, but
Yeah,
why?
I think that's a good way to put it because the way I would imagine it is exactly um sort of like that result the result is obvious. Your generation is not insulated from what my generation is going through, mostly
Hmm.
because of how interconnected we are. At least the
Mm.
the younger millennials and Gen Z are, you know, they're on the same, meme templates for sure.
Yeah.
And that's not to say that older millennials can't relate. I think we do. We're just I don't want to say gun shy again, but we definitely have this sort of like hesitation, I think, to say for sure we know what's going
Mhm.
on because we've been lied to and wrong about so many things.
Yes.
It's just like, man, I don't know if I can take another disappointment.
Yeah, I'd say, I mean, older millennials are rightly hesitant to kind of interact with what's going on, um, understanding that the risk of disappointment or things getting worse is there. Whilst,
Sure, yeah.
I mean, when you're young, you feel bright-eyed and fresh-faced, and you have all this hope. Like, I still have all this hope for society and the world and other people, even when I say I don't. And I mean, that's I guess just part of being younger, but um,
I
yeah,
think
it's
it's I think
definitely.
you actually I mean, it seems as though you have a healthier optimism than millennials did. So you're definitely
Mm,
not going to fall as hard if you do get disappointed. I that's my
mm,
prediction.
yeah, I think one thing is Zoomers kind of we I think we try to like make the best out of things. There's been a shift in kind of even feeling a duty to parents. I think that's not fully phasing out, but those kind of pressures are easing off. It's like
Definitely.
I'd say Zoomers don't feel like they need to, you know, live with their parents. We it feels like millennials are more individualist, but that's just because Zoomers can take it for granted since millennials did the work. Millennials, they were the first to kind of, fly out of the nest. So we're just like, right, if they did it, we're fine.
Yeah, I
Um,
don't know if that's a healthy confidence or not, but um
mhm.
yeah. Uh
So,
yeah, and I've had interactions with Gen Z at work just as much as I've had interactions with boomers and Gen X uh, at places of work, and I definitely get the impression that they sort of look at me differently. Like they can tell almost by interacting with people what generation you're from. It's almost like they do have
mhm,
this sensitivity to uh, I don't know if the right word is like the energy that people are
yeah.
putting off, and that sounds way woo woo, and that's not me at all, as you know. But like I'm trying to
Mhm,
describe an experience uh,
yeah.
of talking to someone from Gen Z in person. So like I'm getting all these nonverbal cues, and usually I'm in a leadership position where they're looking to me for either
Mhm,
direction or even something as simple as like confidence. Uh,
mhm,
and it's like they seem to be able to relax a little bit more and
yeah.
sort of like it's almost like they have an extra guard up that can be kind of knocked down pretty quick once they
Mm,
know that like things are okay.
yeah.
And
Yeah. Um,
I don't know if that even makes sense. I'm just trying to describe like the
mhm,
interactions that I've had. Or are you sort of following what I'm
yeah.
saying?
I think so. I think one thing with having, I mean, if you interact online, you will have a different internet persona. As much as you try to be, forthcoming and be yourself, um, through text, things will be missed. And just for ease of conversation, you won't. correct people when they get something wrong. There'll be a shift in who you are in person, who you are online, and I think um, growing up in that space, you definitely learn to, I guess, compartmentalize parts of yourself. Um, and when you interact with like your parents, um, you interact with an authority figure, people of different generations, you can only show some of yourself. Internet lingo, like memes and so on, will never be understood. It would take too much context, and even after trying to explain it all, it wouldn't be funny, it wouldn't be profound.
It would have lost its original value.
Yeah, definitely. And I've absolutely tried to explain it before.
I've
So I,
Yeah, you know,
Mhm,
my older sister is like at the tail end of Gen X, and I
mhm,
remember even in high school having to explain to her certain online slang terms like leet speak. I don't know if you're I don't know if you're old
mhm.
enough to know what that is, but
No,
leet speak. Oh, you said no?
no.
Okay, so leet speak really quickly was when you could say words or phrases or even spell them differently with numbers. Like
Ah,
even the term leet speak was spelled 1337 speak.
mhm.
Um
Okay.
and and so like I remember vividly describing to my sister what it meant to be owned. Like total gamer uh callback there, but
Mhm,
um she had no idea, so I had to like explain it, and she got it, but I
mhm.
doubt she ever used it ever again. She was just like, "Oh, well, now I know," and then like went on with her life.
Yeah.
And I imagine it's similar situation to
Mhm.
someone who you would have to explain things to.
Yeah,
If you're not in,
definitely.
it's not even worth it.
And it absolutely takes too much time. But when you reach like millennials, older millennials, younger ones, the lines start to blur and you feel safer
Absolutely.
because
Yeah,
you can bring forth part of your personality which would just be locked away. Um,
true. Yeah.
so, it's definitely felt um you just understand by interacting with someone how they look. This person is someone I can talk to.
Yeah, yeah. I think okay, so that's probably a better way of describing what I think I see whenever I interact with Gen Z. They're trying to see how much they can relate to me because there's so much of their
Mhm,
lives that have nothing to do with the real world or
mhm.
non-digital world. What should we even call that? The offline world.
Yeah,
So like their lives offline are almost more foreign to them than their online world, which is
yeah,
wild. But it's interesting that I'm seeing signs of that. They have to
mm,
see or sort of estimate or measure how much of that life they can really bring out.
yeah. And I think it's often misunderstood by, I guess, people looking from the outside in. Would Zoomers survive without the internet? Of course. Like we're still people. We can read, we can draw, people can entertain themselves, but we have such, I guess, rich online interactions and personas, and as much as there are the negative sides of things, people find so much joy and support and information just through the internet, getting advice as to how to deal with um, embarrassing situations, social scenarios, how to get better grades. There are just so many ways to easily get the information you need through the internet without having to, I guess, put yourself at any risk, which is very convenient. But
Yeah, and I would say that
um,
you can't you're not overstating, and I would even say that you can't overstate the fact that it is a rich life that is being led online. It's not devoid. It's not empty. There are real connections and real interactions and real experiences happening online. I think that's not only undeniable; it's measurable in the fact that
yeah,
uh, things like marriage statistics are dropping like a bad habit. That people's individual lives are so much better than, what would be traditionally seen as a fulfilling existence. Um,
hmm
and I don't want to
and
beat up on married people too much, but uh, yeah, they're not doing anything wrong. They just did things differently than people are beginning to now. But yes,
hmm
I think it's very important to acknowledge that it is a rich life that is being cultivated
yeah,
at a much younger time age than ever before in history.
hmm
As you said, as young
yeah.
as
I
13.
think definitely younger.
Oh well, yeah.
um,
I should know. I have an 11-year-old who he's been on online uh
mhm,
a good, I don't know, 6 years before I ever was.
mhm. Yeah, in part it's scary, but I think one thing about the internet is when you view it as just another part of life, you have to tailor your life to suit your needs. You have to cut people out of your life who you don't feel should belong in it. You know, find healthy alternatives to unhealthy habits, and we tailor our in real life um, interactions. So why is it any different online? And I think some people understand that, but I guess especially um, being on there as a teenager and feeling pressure from your peers and kind of having to live up to that as you move into adulthood. Um, Growing up is hard on the internet because of all the expectations, but when you take that away and just think, what do I need? You can really just create areas that are for you, that are good for you, and manage things. And I think for all the bad social media, the bad rep social media gets, and um, people that spend a lot of their time online get, it, it doesn't have to just be this one negative side. Um, yeah.
Yeah, I feel like the topic alone could have been the whole podcast. Um, but it being, as we said, the eve of uh, a presidential election in the United States, I
Mm.
should ask, do you want to get into the
Oh.
politics?
Yeah.
Oh, I know it's your favorite, or at least no,
Mm.
I I don't think I would be uh, out of turn saying that you like talking racial politics. Is that right?
Definitely.
Yeah.
It's fun. I should say that I'm definitely black.
Okay. And and
That's legit.
and despite you know popular belief, I am white.
Mm.
I've
Uh,
been told that I'm I resemble an old black man, or that I talk
oh,
black online, and I don't know what that
really?
means. Don't know what that
Me
means.
neither.
Okay. I don't know. I've been told many things online that don't make sense, and that's
Mhm.
just another one of them. So white male, and you. What are your pronouns? Should we get into that?
Yeah,
Okay.
let's go for it. Um, where to start? I feel like
Well, I'll
racially.
give us a good
Mhm.
starting point. Um,
Yeah.
you get American news by way of uh, the media in the UK,
Hmm.
and I'm almost certain that if it's if it's biased and nuanced as a domestic citizen, it has to be like a nightmare game of telephone by the time it reaches your country.
Yeah. Um, I should say it's just very confusing. I mean, firstly, I'm not sure Brits even understand how our government works,
Right.
let alone trying to, unravel what's going on in the US. We definitely understand that it's, important, that it will have a massive impact on not just America, but our country. Yet, um, we're not really sure on policies being pushed by the presidential candidates. It's, we mostly just get news of Trump uh, when he messes up a speech, which, is kind of often. Um, and I'm completely unsure of Biden's position. I didn't even realize he was vice president
Oh, that's
uh,
fair. Yeah.
under Obama.
Obama sort of did have a large presence in his own administration to the point where uh, Joe Biden became a meme. Like just him and Joe Biden after his administration was done.
Hmm.
It was these like cutesy photos of Joe Biden with Obama, and
Yeah, I
that was
remember.
about as much of the limelight as he got was post
Hmm.
administration memes.
Yeah, and I mean, it's strange. Even watching the presidential debates, which aren't really aired here, uh, like it's not popular to watch here, but we don't have that in the UK. We don't have like debates the way Americans do it.
Oh
And
yeah, I should mention for the benefit of American listeners as well. The UK is an odd thing to an American ear for a couple of reasons. Their form of grandstanding in Parliament is actually really exciting. Um, it, well, I should say exciting to listen to if you've never heard it before. As a Brit, I'm sure you're just like, oh, not this again. You know,
yeah.
and not only that, but your media actually doesn't seem to take politicians seriously. It's like the media has this collective understanding that politicians are just a front. They're not actually who they are, and so they are relentless in their like verbal and written bludgeoning of these, you know, civil servants, you know, like these elected
Yeah.
officials. They are they are easy targets for, you know, a sharp tongue, whereas in the United States there's this very ingrained understanding that elected officials are important people, and it's sort of taken for granted that these people got that way or got to that station in life because they earned it, or they have sort of like this moral or um, personal constitution that allowed them to rise to that station. I
Hmm.
I don't think there's a 1-to-1 ratio between Brits and American politicians that way. And, you know,
Yeah.
I think so correct me if I'm wrong or feel free to elaborate to that.
Hmm. I think, I mean, it's strange because America definitely seems to have this culture of rising to the top, working hard, and making your way up. whilst in the UK, there's this unspoken hierarchy in a way because we have the monarchy and we still have, the aristocrats and people who are in the upper class and have been for generations. Um, and no one, it's taboo to really call it out. It's taboo to call out the class divide. Um, and it's almost as if you're meant to accept it and accept that it's right. It's quite strange considering the time this is. We're in the 21st century, but um, that's kind of the norm here. So seeing like that difference um, is very odd. It's
Yeah, I would
understandable,
imagine
but
it's
odd.
yeah, both Brits and Americans probably look at each other sidelong glance
Hmm.
at how we operate in as far as government goes. But yeah, as you mentioned before, even the mere structure of government could be confusing to someone who
Yeah.
didn't actually study political science or government or public affairs in any detail. I mean, up until high school, I had a pretty general understanding of the U.S. Constitution and no understanding of foreign governments. Just that democracy was usually, uh, you know, at play. It wasn't
Yeah.
until I actually majored in political science that I really got two hands on the topic and saying that I have a firm grasp on exactly how every government is run, it would even be a stretch. So I can only imagine, people who have no interest in politics view uh, sort of the circus that is contemporary politics.
Yeah. I'd say it's odd because, I mean, American politics has definitely influenced how British politics has functioned in the last few years, especially since Trump has come into power. But I'd say probably since the economic collapse. And I mean, I was very young, so I can't go on memory, but um, kind of, I believe that the prime minister at the time, who was Labour, which would be like a left wing party,
Mhm.
he stepped down. And since then, we've had a conservative government, or well, we call them Tories, but yeah, the Conservative Party. So it's quite different to the US because, I mean, in some ways it's similar, but I'd say the conservatives here are like associated with um, being monarchists, being like old money and cuts and just similar things to, I guess, a usual conservative party, but um, still different because different country.
Right. The
And
history is definitely different, and it's
mhm,
culturally, you know,
yeah,
I mean, our our revolution was against your monarchy. So I
yeah.
mean, just you can sort of rest your hat on that difference alone.
Mm.
Um,
So, like the idea of gun rights, so freedom of expression or freedom of speech and so on, which has kind of been, I guess, championed by right-wing groups in the US lately. That's not a thing here, um, because guns aren't a thing. But it's more about maintaining the status quo, I'd say, with conservative parties here, and that's controversial.
yeah, I guess it would be when your goal is to I don't know. Is it a socialist leaning Labor Party or is it a
Uh, Socialist. Some, well, lately, um, the recently, well, now suspended, um,
Oh yeah, I heard about that.
Labour MP Jeremy Corbyn. He was the leader of the Labour Party, and he ran for president. Oh gosh, mixing it up for
Prime
prime
Minister. Yeah.
minister. Yeah, against Boris Johnson last November. Um, and he was very much a socialist. Some would say he's the UK's Bernie Sanders.
Hmm.
Um, Very much like consistent in his views since the 70s, I believe. And he was what people would say like he's outside of the establishment. So I guess the whole circle of old money people that are coming from familiar families who have all been, involved in politics or involved in certain businesses and enterprises. Um, he was outside of that. So that was strange. It's like, I don't know, it's like when Kate Middleton as a commoner married into the royal family. That's weird.
Hmm.
Uh, so he got a lot of backlash because of that. And the Labour Party itself was split in half with a lot of people um, going against him. Although some would say it was that there was an issue with um, anti-Semitism within the party, and he's been under scrutiny for not dealing with it um, well enough. But that's controversial. Some are saying he is an anti-Semite, whilst others are saying it's because he's not like the rest and is being, thrown to the wolves. So that's what that's what the UK has been dealing with, which has been difficult, especially considering, I mean, Brexit. Uh,
And
wait,
I should jump in really quick.
mm,
You were mentioning that he was like a socialist, which is sort of like an outsider even within his own party. The
yeah,
reason why Americans might be confused why that would matter is because in a parliamentary democracy, typically
mm,
uh, coalitions to form a majority must be formed in order to legislate, and if legislation fails, then it triggers a referendum, and Parliament has to be reformed. It's a whole mess. Like so it is actually a big deal that someone who's seen as an outsider takes the lead of a party. Um
mhm,
and and so yeah,
yeah,
that for the Americans out there, it is weird if an outsider takes the lead. So like
mhm,
anyway, hopefully that was clear
yeah,
enough.
uh, definitely. In a way, it's like, I mean, not to even compare him to Trump, but the way that Trump kind of didn't like carry himself as a politician, like his whole brand was he's not a politician.
Hmm.
Um, you know, other side of the political spectrum, that's Corbyn, although probably more polite. He would have like a messy tie going to Parliament. He just wasn't like everyone else, which was why some loved him, why some hated him. Um, and I think there's just been a lot of unrest with Brexit because it was kind of clear that the Prime Minister who suggested it in the first place, David Cameron, um, assumed that no one would vote for it.
Right.
Like there was no plan in place because it
Yeah.
wasn't meant to happen.
I sadly I could kind of tell. Uh,
Mm,
in fact, uh, the guy's name escapes me, but one of the more entertaining and flamboyant parliamentary orators who would just lambast and sometimes target people specifically on topics of the EU. Um, it wasn't Boris Johnson. It was another chap.
Uh,
Um, it's
Nigel Farage or
yes, thank you.
yeah.
Yes, Nigel. Good
Mhm.
old Nigel. I could kind of tell after a while, like, oh, I see what he's doing. He's just talking to his base, like
Yeah.
someone in American politics might just, go through their talking points. He just sort of found a
Mhm.
niche uh, to stay elected, um,
Yeah.
but in a more entertaining fashion, at least from an outside perspective. Um, but oh, it was him. I felt embarrassed for him when they were like interviewing him as like a potential leader for Brexit, and he's just like, "Well, I did what I set out to do, and that's get us out, and that's my job is done." And I was just like, "Oh, oh man,
Yeah.
that one trick pony." Oh, so I
Mhm.
know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And there are some
It's
similarities in American politics in that sense, but
mhm.
yeah, yeah.
It's
Calling
very
for change
strange.
without a plan, that's part of politics, sadly enough.
Mhm.
Um,
It's disappointing to see. And I think, I mean, when I was watching it all happen, when I was 16, it was an intense time, Trump and Brexit, and Twitter was very much full scale left wing. Um, and I was
oh, that's
influenced by
changed?
that.
I think it
Uh,
still is.
yeah, yeah, it's still going. But at the time, that's what I had just absorbed. So my memory is very much biased based on that. But um, you know, it seemed to be that there was a lot of concern in the UK about illegal immigrants, and um, a lot of fear mongering was going on, and the party rose up, UKIP, which is UK Independence Party.
Mhm.
Um, what the UK would be trying to gain independence from, like who? I'm unsure, but they were trying, and that's Nigel Farage was the leader of that party, and so they just kept pushing this point about immigrants and more opportunities for British people. And basically, the Conservatives typically distance themselves from working class Brits, so mainly working class white people. And they flipped things around in recent years by appealing to those groups through Brexit. Um, so the election, to an extent, was a surprise because of how many Northerners, who are typically working class white Brits, had voted for Boris Johnson. Um, so it's been a strange time, and I think, um, well, you're American, so you definitely understand how polarized politics has become. But when you start to attach race to a political standpoint, um, it becomes very problematic. People either aren't racist or are racist. People are hateful or compassionate, and it really reduces individuals into just these points, which is what the internet does. Um,
Yeah,
so
yeah. If I
yeah,
could
it's
just make one small point to
mhm,
listeners who didn't have to do the reading, but most of Western civilization, uh, after democracy started springing up, founded um, their liberties on the individual rather than the group. So this transformation towards group identity is I would say, in competition with individual liberties. So that's why you'll see people uh, raising, concerns over the fact that some of these politicians are calling for compelled speech or policing language in general, which is traditionally a Western individual liberty. It's a bedrock on which
Mhm.
um, these democracies were built. So, it, rightly so, uh, people are finding problems with that sort of political strategy.
Yeah, it's definitely um, concerning. And I think um, this may have escaped to some extent, like American viewers of or consumers of any British media or news, but um, I'd say two major events in the UK would be the Grenfell fire and the Windrush scandal outside of Brexit. uh, so essentially, there was in a tower block. So would you call it like a flat? Uh, is is
It's
tower
an
block fine?
apartment
Like
complex.
yeah, we wouldn't call it that. Yeah, but in a set of flats, or an apartment complex, uh, it it was situated in the richest area in the UK. So, um, the council there could afford to, make sure that this building was safe, but they allowed contractors to put up a very like flammable material over the building with um, basically a poor fire escape route and fairly high up in the building. Fridge set fire, and the fire got caught on the outside, and many people died. It was, a tragedy. It was an accident, and for the few days as it was burning, people saw it on the news. There wasn't anything you could do, but the country almost came to a standstill, and people came in massive support, driving from other sides of the country to bring clothes. It was wonderful, but the Prime Minister of the time, Theresa May, she refused to go out and um, even speak about it. She just wasn't anywhere to be seen. And that really became like a reflection of the party as well. Um, because even the Queen went out, and well, the Queen doesn't,
She
she
doesn't
doesn't come
make,
out very often.
yeah,
Yeah.
she doesn't make house calls.
hmm Uh, and even the fire department were being held, like the blame was being shunted onto them despite, firefighters risking their lives and trying their hardest to save people. And there seemed to be, strange methods of counting the dead. Like they didn't count people who tried to escape through the windows and ended up falling and
Oh
dying.
wow.
Yeah, they didn't count people that died in hospitals, only
Oh
those
wow.
that passed in the fire. And there was massive uproar. At the time, people didn't know how it started. And considering, the area it was in, people thought perhaps there was sabotage, to essentially displace the people that lived there because it would have been working class people, quite a few immigrants. So it turned into a race issue through that.
Oh boy.
And yeah, so, it was definitely something it really shook me up for a good 2 years, to be honest. I think, let's say this happened in 2016 or 17, but yeah, so that was, that kind of put a dent in Theresa May's legacy here. And the second issue, the Windrush scandal. So Theresa May was actually the Home Secretary when David Cameron was Prime Minister, and so she dealt with like uh, immigration and came with a policy saying that she wanted to, I quote, create a hostile environment, unquote. Um, so just make Britain a place that immigrants wouldn't want to be in. And
And so let's just give the
yeah,
audience a perspective here. What age were you? And
mhm,
let's remind them, you're a Jamaican citizen
yeah.
in the United Kingdom.
Um, when this, well, when I probably heard about it, I was likely around 16 when I became aware of this. And at that time, I was in fact homeless due to immigration issues um, to do with my family. We were definitely here legally, but just the processing, which was part of the, I suppose, hostile environment plan that she put in place. So, I personally believe that influenced my life. But the Windrush scandal actually outlined that British citizens of Caribbean descent were being deported back to the Caribbean, um, despite not living there since they were children. And this was exposed, and the documents were lost. Well, supposedly lost. Uh, and this was Theresa May's kind of the last straw. Um, so people very much did no longer wanted her in a position of power, and yeah, it's very unfortunate. It was recently discovered that around 9 of the victims of this scandal died without ever getting compensation um, for being wrongfully deported.
Oh well.
So yeah, it's been incredibly concerning. So I think with the whole Black Lives Matter movement and everything that's been going on in the US, some Brits have been using that to kind of bring attention back to, I guess, some of the issues that Black people here are facing, but it's not been successful or
Yeah, I would imagine
coherent.
not because for Americans who don't know, British law enforcement typically don't even carry firearms. So
Yeah.
to suggest that there's excessive law enforcement violence against minorities or anyone, you know, would be hard pressed for evidence or proof, much less
Mhm.
proof.
Absolutely. Like, I'd say that there is a general belief that police here are likely negligent, but uh, violent or aggressive or a threat to your life, like that's a long stretch. There are videos online of people, talking back to the police, making fun of the police, kicking the police and running away.
Yeah, yeah, I would imagine
Yeah. hmm
that
so
would
the
that would
very
probably,
idea.
yeah. Police would not
hmm
be happy if their guns were taken away here because of,
Yeah.
you know, I mean,
hmm
you see what people can get away with even with police armed.
hmm Yeah, it's so in that sense, the police aren't a threat. So it's been it it's the Black Lives Matter movement here is really going to filter off and just dissipate, which I mean that's fine I suppose, but the downside is that it really undermines
Existing
the
issues.
real issues,
Yeah.
yeah, that are being faced. So um I guess that's the issue with a movement that's uncontrolled. Um and kind of when you make it a black versus white issue rather than a justice thing, we want justice. Anyone that wants to stand with us, please stand with us. We're hurt about this thing, but I think there's always a need to blame a group these days, and especially like a group with an identity that they can't control. It's very problematic to blame an entire race or ethnicity or even nationality when that's inaccurate. Um, so I'm quite concerned about where some of this is going, although I, of course, like, wish the best for any victims of a crime like that's awful to experience.
Yeah, and yeah, it's definitely interesting to hear the British perspective on what translates and what doesn't politically. So
Mhm.
obviously, uh, stoking the anti-immigration sentiments seem to translate, whereas um, victimhood by group affiliation, for whatever reason, didn't quite resonate in the same way it
Yeah.
has here. Um, and
Mhm.
perhaps that's just because the demographics are proportionally smaller in the UK, I would imagine.
Yeah.
Uh,
Absolutely.
so
Um,
much less, political power um,
mhm.
for those groups
Like,
that may have been disenfranchised.
mhm. Just the ethnic makeup here, like, um, it's odd seeing, for instance, memes like just casually about Mexican Americans because I mean, Mexicans aren't really in the UK. They're nowhere near here geographically. Um, so whilst here it's mainly white people, then I'd say the next largest ethnic group would be people of Pakistani descent, um, or from just the Middle East and Asia. Um, and afterwards, the you'd have like a very small percentage of black people, and black people are mainly concentrated in cities rather than rural areas. So I guess trying to kind of bring a UK version of the racial issues being dealt with in America is unrealistic, especially since most black uh, people here are first generation immigrants.
Yeah,
Nothing like likely
they.
no more than third or fourth. So, people can people can name, which of their grandparents came to the UK for the first time.
Mm, yeah, yeah. There's a bit of a difference in racial history between the two countries. I'll grant you that. I
Hmm.
guess.
Yep.
Yeah, I think
But
I think the difference is we could go on and on about differences,
yeah.
and of course there are similarities. But we are
Hmm.
at 90 minutes. Um,
Oh.
did you want to take a break, or uh,
Hmm.
or maybe save um, more politics for another time? How are you?
Yeah. Yeah. We can just pop to the loo.
Okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Let's pause here,
Mm,
and we're back. So,
mm,
uh, in that intermission there, uh, we were talking about how we probably owe it to listeners to at least swing the pendulum back towards American politics. Maybe not quite in such detail, but with the election, Eastern Standard Time being in the next couple hours, um, or at least that would be November 3rd. Polls open, I think as early as 7 a.m. But I was an early voter, uh, so I'm glad that's behind me. It weirdly took a little pressure off to know that I had already voted. I couldn't change my mind, no matter how much news was, crammed down our throats. Um, I think just briefly, I'll mention something uh, that I heard on the radio, and then I'll mention something that I that I read about and someone told me about, in terms of just like getting people on the same big picture as I see it with this upcoming election. Um, on the radio, uh, it was NPR, National Public Radio, which is a federally subsidized outlet and news organization in the United States. They talked about a study or a poll uh, done in the 50s, the 1950s, uh, accusing both parties of being too similar and making it too difficult for voters to decide between the parties. And there's lots of reasons for that, but uh, fast forward to today, there's scarcely a topic that you could not find someone uh, the polar opposite of another person between the parties, and that sort of overcorrection uh, almost merits the political destruction of your opponent. That's how extreme opposite these viewpoints are, um, or at least it seems that way. You know, if you turn on the television, uh, or the radio, or go on Twitter, you would almost certainly believe that we were on the brink of some kind of civil war. Some would even say a race war. I've heard that. Um,
Yeah.
and I've actually heard that from some Europeans. So Europeans are a little worried for us.
Yeah.
Everyone's kind of holding their breath a little bit and looking over here. And um, I can tell you that that's probably not going to happen. And I think it's a strong probability that stuff is going to be just fine. I mean, every year you hear about people saying they're going to move to Canada, and Canada says, no, don't come here. And then no one moves, and, you know, people make all these outlandish claims like the sky is falling, or, uh, if things don't go their way, they're going to throw a tantrum. I think the only one who really did move away was Madonna, and I don't even think it was the result of an election. Yeah, she's one of you now, as you know. Um,
Oh no.
oh yeah, she even sounds like you.
Yikes.
But anyway, that's neither
Mm,
here nor there. But yeah, I have heard from Europeans saying that their media sources and their social media, like their news media and their social media, are kind of leading them to believe that we're in the brink of violence.
mhm.
And while the FBI has had their hands full in Portland, Oregon, and in Michigan recently, um, it, it's not really more than normal. Like that's about the
Mhm.
regular amount of crazies. You know, they just made the news. I'm
Yeah.
regularly updated uh, from the Department of Justice by email. I think they send an email out like every day, every weekday at midnight about like all of the court cases that they've done, and there's terrorists and all sorts of violent plots being prosecuted and adjudicated and arraigned every single day. They just don't make the news because typically news media is just trying to leverage perception,
Mhm.
um, and that's gotten bad as of I would say I'd say really bad as of yeah 2016 was pretty bad. Maybe it was
Mhm.
2012. It's it's been a while. I don't have it right in front of me, but I am thinking of several sort of cornerstone events that really made
Mhm.
me think, wow, this is really what we're gonna do. Uh, for anyone who's super curious, it's I'm definitely thinking of a Newt Gingrich moment where he was trying to talk about perception versus FBI facts and how people feel is just as valid as FBI statistics, and that's when I really sort of got the impression that it was more of a fire versus fire situation, which is a step down, but not nearly civil war, declaring,
Yeah.
there's no secession and,
Mhm.
planned. Um, yes, there's been reports of an uptick in militias and sort of organizations completely legal and completely protected under the Constitution, but um, it's a lot of saber rattling, and
Mhm.
I would say the only thing out of the ordinary is how many people think it matters this time. Um,
Yeah.
and so, uh, I mean, if you want to send thoughts and prayers my way, that's great. Um, but I don't think I'll be using any ammunition anytime soon. Uh, that being said, this election is kind of a big deal. There is a lot at stake, and the second point I wanted to sort of touch on was it was a discussion on a forum about a video where this guy who very very reasonable, uh, well read, um, uh, uh, contemporary political analyst, uh, who was known for his I guess his what would you call it, like his not a bias but sort of like an appreciation or deference toward conservative views, came out to say that he was voting for Biden, and he gave uh two main reasons. The first was that the presidency really doesn't matter that much. He mentioned that for all the reasons that people are getting out to vote, the presidency really has no influence on them. So, like social justice, he's saying president has no real influence. Uh, but during
Mhm.
his explanation of that, he was saying, you know, yes, you could probably change Title IX, but that's not that big of a deal. And um, for those who don't know what Title IX is, it's sort of like an equal opportunity law that was designed to make sure that uh, women had the same collegiate funding in public institutions
Mhm.
as men, which is sort of, I mean, it really did open up a can of worms, and then it was sort of
Mhm.
co-opted to leverage all sorts of social change in the name of equality, and then later equity, which is it's not what it sounds like. It's equal outcome versus equal opportunity sort of deal. We don't have to get
Mhm.
into all that, but his argument was the president really doesn't have an impact on culture, but one thing that he said that seemed to kind of contradict that was how he didn't he didn't see the value in voting for someone who stoked uh, animus right. I guess he's saying that he'd rather vote for someone who could calm uh,
Mhm.
the social strife. But to
Uh-huh.
me, that's sort of like a contradictory perspective, saying the president has no influence on culture, and at the same time saying this president has had a tremendous influence on culture.
Yeah.
so so I didn't quite take him at his word there, but his second point was that well, I mean, let me back up to his first point. He was saying that the president really doesn't have that much power or very little power. Well, he kind of does. If you have a president um, with a veto power against a Congress, then that Congress then has to have an overwhelming majority to override his veto power. So if a Republican is in the White House and all of Congress is also Republican, then basically their voice becomes law, and vice versa. If it's all Democrats, then
Mhm.
there really is no stopping that sort of um, type of rule.
Yeah.
Uh, the presidency, many people don't know this, and I'll definitely cover this in a smaller segment. But the Electoral College does represent minority views through the states, and and that is uh, an intended check and balance against sort of mob rule. Um,
Ah.
but to his second point, which was that um, Biden is some kind of Trojan horse for all of these liberal policies. Uh, he's saying that even if he was some sort of Trojan horse, you know, he's not going to have uh, the intended impact that that is feared from the conservatives. Uh, the problem is that if you listen to him, he really has no policies of his own, so he's just going to effectively default to uh, those more extreme positions. He's going to play to his base the same way Trump did, um, and so I bring up this guy and his points, uh, sort of just to open up um, the discussion. Feel free to react to anything I've said because um, it feels like I'm on the verge of just rambling without response. Um,
Uh-huh. Oh, sorry.
anytime the electoral college is brought up in a monologue, that's gonna put people to sleep. So,
It's
um,
also late.
oh, true, yeah, we have
Mm.
done quite a bit of time here, so we can
Yeah.
wrap this up pretty quickly.
Oh.
Um,
Mhm. Can
as
we do
far
it
as
again?
oh yeah, we'll definitely this will be the first of many. How about that?
Mm. Yeah.
Okay, so uh, let me see if I can wrap up that point.
Mm.
The 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 reasons for voting uh, Biden or Trump seem to have been based on reasons to not vote for the other. So, like,
Mhm.
I even found myself uh, a libertarian considering how much I didn't like some of the track records and policies that the Biden administration was saying they would bring. And then I was like, that's just not how you vote. Like, you have to vote your conscience. That's at least how I vote. Uh, and I think that's the responsible way to vote. Um, so if you are undecided and you're listening to this in the waning hours of the election, I encourage you not to vote against something, but to vote for something, and that's how real change will happen. That's why I voted libertarian again. So, um, did you have anything to add or ask or final
Oh, that was
thoughts?
great.
Okay. Well, thanks again for doing this.
Mm,
Hopefully, we'll do it again sometime soon.
yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah. Bye, everyone.